So this is a second lecture. Focus of this talk is on history as far as it is relevant to the parametric design. So we go back in in a different ways, and I will try to share with you some events, and some of them you of course find familiar. Others might be new to you, but they will connect somehow. So we are dealing here with this kind of algorithmic thinking and its evolution, and we will review topics, as I said last time, among them general systems theory. We mentioned a little bit about cybernetics. We show the work of Gordon Pask, who was behind the archigram, also philosopher and computer scientist. Mentioned work of Negroponte, who was directing Media Lab for a long time. Bill Mitchell, who was also one of the illustrious early writers in the field. And principal text for this is Computational Design Thinking by Achim Menges, who is right now professor in Stuttgart. All those are computer nerds, of course, but some of them are early, some of them are buried in a distant history. Here, beginnings of geometry, which is very important to CAD, as you know, can be traced to the ancient antiquities, to Mesopotamia, to Egypt. And as an example, there is a very beautiful papyrus, which is currently in Moscow, in a museum. And the papyrus is famous because it gives the formula or algorithm, if you like, for calculating the volume of truncated pyramid. You can see it right here. So this is going way back, of course. Now geometry came back to us from, as you know, from Euclid came back to us through Arab work, which was much better read than us. We managed to destroy everything we knew in the Middle Ages. And in 1310, this is an illumination of the manuscript based on the oldest surviving translation of Euclid from Arabic to Latin. I am very impressed with this little painting or illumination, because you see that there is a woman, there is a lady who actually is in position of instruction. She is teaching the other young people, mostly maybe monks or young scholars, and I think there is kind of anecdotal. You can see that they all look at her; they don't look at the subject. They're not very focused. So this is kind of humorous, but Euclidean geometry is very closely connected with computational geometry, as you sense and know, and with computer graphics. So we go back to very long line in our civilization. Computational geometry is today a branch of computer science, and it could be stated in terms of geometry. Of course, you know from your history of architecture lectures you know of history of art, Cinquecento, Brunelleschi, Alberti, Piero della Francesca, Serlio, they all studied geometrical methods. Euclid was back, and they defined new grounds for perspective, wrote treatise about architecture, which was grounded in understanding of geometry, and in a sense they were contributing, bringing back mathematics to art. So Sebastiano Serlio, who wrote very beautifully illustrated volumes about architecture, he moved in this book. He moves reader from Euclidean heaven-like area composed of the definitions of geometry, which comprise of point, line, square, which is perfect object, In the second book, the underlying the three-dimensional forms of nature are represented through perspective. In the third book, architectural form is reflected in idealized measure drawing, almost of drawings of antiquity. Fourth is a description of orders, classical orders, and the last pages are devoted to the perspectives of the theater. So in all those illustrations and discourses, geometry is already taken. Euclidean geometry is very much part of architectural discourse. Then when we go, say, good 150 years later after Serlio, we have to recognize Descartes. Discourse on the method, Discours de la méthode by René Descartes, was published in 1673, and all the high school students know his famous quotation, Je pense, donc je suis. I think, therefore I am. One of appendixes to this book was called La Géométrie and contained first introduction of Cartesian coordinate system. Now, this Cartesian coordinate system is basically study of geometry using coordinates, which you're familiar today, and this is basis for analytic geometry, which is widely used in physics, engineering, and it's foundation of modern fields, including computational geometry. So you see that this evolved very clearly from those two traditions, if you like, one layer on top of another, and one of the most enduring legacy of Descartes, or Cartesiusz po polsku, was his development of coordinate geometry, and earlier today we refer it as Cartesian geometry or analytical geometry, study of geometry using principles of algebra. Coordinate system is usually applied to manipulate equations for planes, lines, straight lines, squares, often in 2 or sometimes 3 dimensions of measurement. Analytic geometry can be explained more simply. It's concerned as attempt to define geometric properties of shapes in a numerical way and extracting numerical information from that representation. Introduction of analytic geometry was beginning of modern mathematics. You see, look at the coordinate system, and Descartes in painting on the right-hand side next to the Queen of Sweden. Aristocracy was a really recognized importance of scientists in a society. And on the left-hand side, we see a numerical description of simple square or rectangle, hierarchically described by points, vertices, and vectors constituting this object, which is the structure of any basic 2D card which you use today. If you put your AutoCAD in a 2D mode and on a projection plane, that's actually what you do, what your system does. So this is deploying this culture. So I guess few words about computational geometry, which is, as I mentioned, study of algorithm, which I guess geometric modeling. It's important to mention that in CAD it spans 3 levels of abstractions, and frequently we are not totally engaging more than a first level. So the first level is interface abstraction. The modeling system is presented at the highest level of abstraction, but its interface is easy to use due to the visual aspect. We interact with the system through iconic syntax, many conceptual tools for constructing, editing, and archiving, even for reasoning about design properties are at hand. Now, the second level of abstraction is algorithmic abstraction. This is comprising of mathematical and algorithmic infrastructure. It implements the conceptual operations available in the user interface. For example, algorithm construction of intersection of two vectors could be described like that. And finally, the third level of abstraction is programming language abstraction. There is substratum of arithmetic and symbolic computations that are used as primitives by the algorithmic infrastructure. Because of those levels of abstraction, designer was largely kept from a process, not venturing beyond the first level. But this might be changing for your generation, as you already witnessed that in the beginning of this course. I just want to come back maybe briefly to, can I go back? No, I can't. I have to go to Navigator, go back like that. Okay, I'll go back here. Okay. So I just want you to look at this drawing on the left. This is airport, designed for airport in Japan, Kansai Airport in Osaka. If you fly to Japan, to Osaka, you land at this airport. This is the airport right here, the top. Oh, I cannot point. Not such luck. I should have brought the pointer, but in the top white kind of T-shape is the airport, okay, or main part of it. But you see the geometry governing the design of this airport by Renzo Piano was conceived on a computer. You can see the scale of the radius is 16 kilometers to develop party for a design. So computer drafting systems replaced manual construction drawings, but knowledge of geometry acquired in the previous generation still is relevant. Among advantages of the electronic drawing is that it can be modified, archived, transferred easily, maybe automatically verified for accuracy, dimensional accuracy, and inspected by other collaborators. Underlying geometric structure constructing our work is often more obscure and hidden from us than it was in the past, and this could be seen as limitations in design. I will refer to this text from which I want to quote from Introduction to Computational Design Thinking by Manges. So he writes, computation has profound impact on both perception and the realization of architectural form, space, and structure. It shifts the way one perceives form, the way in which form is purposed, and the way in which form is produced. The fundamental concepts which underlie computational theory and techniques expose form as a subsidiary component of environment. An environment is a complex web of energies in dynamic exchange of both regeneration and degeneration. The emergence of this perspective has come to the confluence of different modes of thinking in alignment with various scientific, technological, and cultural advancement spanning long time, if not centuries. Specifically, computation and design represents an accumulation of multi-layered concepts ranging from systems theory and cybernetics to morphogenesis and developmental biology. The intention of this outlay of concepts, methods, and perspectives is to establish multifaceted yet comprehensive description of what computational design thinking may constitute in architecture. As I mentioned before, one critical aspect of working in computational manner is processing information algorithmically. The idea of the algorithm can be traced back to the work of Norwegian mathematician Axel Thue, who invented a rewriting program operating on a string of signs in 1914. His decision-making procedures encapsulated all basic aspects of algorithmic computing. Most generally, one can extract from this definition of algorithm as a set of procedures consisting of finite number of rules which define succession of operations for the solution of given problem. In this way, algorithm is a finite sequence of explicit elementary instructions described in an exact, complete, yet general manner. The application and execution of algorithm on computer happens through programming languages which enable computing procedure. This is fundamental property of computation as a technical achievement, but also as a theoretical framework in which systems of virtual and physical existence are culmination of methodically developed information sets. So this is one person in this lineup of contemporary influences. Well, the second is this guy, Norbert Wiener. He was MIT professor, and he is considered father of cybernetics. So he says, the nervous system of the automatic machine and nervous system and the automatic machine are fundamentally alike in that they are devices which make decisions on basis of decisions they have made in the past. So he's talking about feedback loop. So term automated design, this was a holistic vision of computer programs which could process complex design briefs into specific architectural solutions. This alluded to the question of how computer can or even should mimic human thought processes and ingenuity. This came at the same moment at which cybernetic theory was popularized by Norbert Wiener. So this is 1940s in the US. So he advanced the notion of systems theory to address the new existence of man-machine relationship, simulating a notion of how computers may be utilized to expand human intellect rather than redundantly to process which form such knowledge. What arose, in short, was perspective at which architecture could be both perceived and pursued as a system. This implies that formulation of architecture occurs through the understanding and development of complex interrelation of material, parts, and social engagement, shaping form, space, and structure. Wiener is considered the originator of cybernetics, formalization of notion of feedback with implication for engineering, system control, computer science, biology, neuroscience, philosophy, and organization of society. So the first graphical systems, which those of you who came on time seen the clip of the Ivan Sutherland thesis, which describes well the project, and there's another presentation also I can point you to, maybe in one of the slides. I give URL even to it. So he applied the idea of constraints, flex relationship of geometries, and geometries could be drawn as parametric instances representing different aspects of form, space, and structure. Sketchpad, this was the name of his thesis and his project, allowed method of variation and design formation to occur through graphical input. He used light pen, and among the fundamental, I guess, issue with the sketchpad was that the method was parametric, associatively a rule-based system of generation, and it was so seminal that it influenced computer graphics for generations to come. In fact, when we look at our current CAD systems, one sometimes pity that the development went in a kind of different way than he envisaged. That's why it's important to look at his work today. I give a reference to his thesis study, so I think we can go into it later in depth. This is a link for another presentation from Lincoln Labs from 60s of a little bit longer, which gives extensive view of his project. And his work will be also given on the reader to study a little bit closer, so maybe I'll skip that part and preempting it. So let me continue, go back to the Achim Menge's text. So how all this was represented in architectural theory, it was, I guess, shift from the view of architecture as material object to as a system comprised of working with a series of interrelated systems. And that's this program Sketchpad unfolded the logic to capture interrelated geometries and had considerable impact. The description of design was not longer symbolically the representation of physical elements as they lie against each other, but rather a summation of the forces, pressures, and constraints which realize the form. The first experiments with computation design were typically based on specific singular design briefs. Over time, as those initial programs were addressing larger audience, design scenarios become more biased towards method and objects, which were then standardized. Although this has been the conventional trajectory of software development in design, the roots of computational approach were seen already in these very early experiments. Goes on saying that every reflection about system thinking, that every aspect of form, whether piece-like or pattern-like, can be understood as a structure of components. I think he's quoting Christopher Alexander. Also, he had also a strong background in mathematics. That's why his relationship to computing is important. Every object is a hierarchical of components, the large ones specifying a pattern of distribution of the smaller ones. The small ones themselves thought as a first site for very clearly piece-like. In fact, again, patterns specifying the arrangement and the distribution are still smaller components. This quote from Synthesis of Form, which is, I guess, another PhD at the same time. So he was almost concurrent with the Southerner. He also mentioned here in this text Aristotle and Bertalanffy, whom I talk about a little bit later. This was a guy who invented general systems theory, which we all use now. So, this is a quote from this German-Hungarian philosopher and biologist at the same time, and mathematician. He says an open system is defined as a system in exchange of matter with its environment. presenting import and export, building up, breaking down of its material components. General systems theory, this was his thesis, was formulated as universal scientific discipline to decipher the laws which rule the definition of organized wholes. Folded into architecture, as exemplified by Alexander's writings on design process and physical organization in 60s, theory implied profound changes to design thinking. Contrary to established design approaches, Alexander argued that an overall design problem cannot be divided into sub-problems, and consequently it is impossible to arrive at a novel design solution as a summary process of solving individual problems one after another. Alexander described the system as that which focuses on overall behavior accomplished through the interaction among parts. The use of words among parts is critical in this definition, as it states the knowledge of components has to be complemented with the knowledge complemented with the knowledge of how components interact, whether it be in competition or continuity. As defined initially by Aristotle, later by Bartolomé, systems do not function simply as summation of the whole. Holistic nature cannot be seen in the individual part, nor it can be seen with addition of its parts. System behavior emerges only in dynamics of the interaction of parts. So rather than rely on intuitive search for solution, parametric design often involves precise step-by-step technique according to rules and inputs. This way of thinking about the process of design as a rigorous, rule-based system is referred to as algorithmic thinking. Mathematical knowledge and algorithmic thinking have been the traits of an architect, certainly at least since the time of antiquity. Mahim Jabi, whom I quote, refers to Vitruvius and brings Corbeau and Messiaen grids as examples to support this argument. Perhaps. Today, individuals who wish to use parametric design or architecture find themselves faced with the challenge of learning algorithmic concepts as well as mathematics that are more familiar to software programmers than to designers. And that's a kind of bit of a dilemma. So, now I have prepared for you the reading material, which I'm going to distribute, and I'll dwell on it more, but I give you a quick overview of the nature of this reader. I guess first I want to start again with this slide which I talked to you last time we finished my first lecture, and I recalled the Alexander Calder, sculptor, modernist sculptor, American modernist sculptor, who did those beautiful mobiles, among other things. And he said the most people who looked at the mobile, it is not no more than a series of the flat objects that move. So to few, though it may be a poetry. So he kind of brings this kind of hidden element which exists in our discipline, which cannot be totally rationalized, and certainly cannot be coded. And I think this is the important thing not to forget while you're working with those new, explore those new techniques and tools. So I isolated for you 12 articles to get closer to. And they touching the subjects I raised here. The first, actually, there's 13 articles, and the first one you don't have to take a position on, but it's good to read. The first one is a piece by von Goethe, by a famous romantic poet, you know, from school, who was, of course, also a scientist. And he wrote few seminal pieces. One of them, essay called Formation and Transformation. So Goethe actually invented the notion of morphology, which seems to be, to this course, even more relevant than his poetry. So as a definition of morphology, Goethe depicts illicit character of system of both animate and inanimate nature by inextricable link of form and formation. The system is in constant transformation, and Goethe breaks from the Aristotelian view that elements of dynamic organism can be isolated and dissect their functioning with the character as a whole. The characteristic of natural behavior conceptualizes interaction, iteration, generation, variation, to which Goethe alludes, and the manner by which they are deciphered is fundamental to exacting computation design. Important is not only the set of instruction, but also meta-instruction, which describe the transformational activities giving rise to overall functioning system. So I have I actually distribute this short essay of Goethe, which is fun to read, and then I share with you 12 papers, or 12 pieces, if you like. I would like class. I think there's almost 30 people sign up for the class, so I don't see here. So I imagine you will be spearheads for that. But I will see 12 groups, each group taking one paper, reading it. So I quickly go through a summary of those 12 papers, so you know what you have to read. And I would like all those assignments to be unique, so no two groups each group taking one paper on. So I imagine, is there 12 of you now? No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, I'm sure. So you have your pick, I guess. The groups should not be bigger than 2, at the most 3 students. I don't know how many people we have in the class. Yes. So the first paper is on theory of transformation by British botanist Darcy Wentworth Thompson. He wrote this seminal book, which is still being printed, on growth and form, where he laid foundation for understanding the associated repercussions of environmental pressures and geometric formation. In this text I selected for you, he establishes mathematics as a route to which repercussions can be mapped of transformation. Not only it is described as a means for deciphering an individual course of development or growth, but Thompson also outlays interpolation between multiple morphometric mappings as a means to project potentials in form. This sets 2 fundamental branches of conceptual framework for computational geometry: parametric and homologies. Parametric equation is defined as a constant equation in which relational parameters vary. So the second paper is is one by Ludwig von Bartalanffy, and this is the grounding for general systems theory. So what you know from school as a critical feedback loop and any diagramming or basic programming comes from this paper. This all came from here. So this essay called An Outline on, it comes from an essay, I think, from Outline on General Systems Theory. He provides universal description, how the dynamic systems operate, and this proposition is sort of fundamental to our culture. You should be familiar with it, at least to carry intelligent conversation. So it's good read, and I think it's encouraging to read that. The third paper to read is Ivan Sutherland PhD thesis. It's not very long, and it's also, it's not distributed in the reader, but I give a link. Oh, it's posted on Google Plus for you, so you can download it from there. In fact, I would like all students in the class to read those papers, but only one group examines it in depth to the point that each group can propose 2 questions on a subject of this paper, penetrating questions and providing outline answers, maybe maximum 1 page. This at least will able to access this knowledge. So Sketchpark I already outlined, so I will not go into it. Christopher Alexander is translating the general systems theory to architecture, so it's also is of an interest. Gordon Pask is, I guess, he took the work of Norbert Wiener, who he was a student at Cambridge, and Norbert Wiener came to give a lecture, and he was kind of helping him, and got close to his, listened to lecture, I guess, and then he developed that further, and later when Archigram started, he went to AA later, and there people from Archigram and him were kind of very close. He was one of the first computer scientists working with this kind of creative architects. So you see a lot of relationship of Archigram to his thinking. His article, which is discussing architectural relevance to cybernetics, this is all dated start 60s, mid-60s, but was published in early architectural design. This is a paper by Nicolas Negroponte, who became trained as an architect, MIT grad, so he matrix science degree too, and he later became director of Media Lab at MIT. He wrote a piece called Architectural Machine, and was first actually who took some of those early efforts of Sutherland and translated to architectural design and to urban design in a sense, because some of his exercises were planning. So his conception of what he called computer-aided is more aligned with computational approach, transforming computer from subservient machine to intelligent environment. Also interesting concept. Another paper is by William Mitchell, who was Australian architect, teacher in UCLA, later an author, number of many books on computer-aided design, later dean of MIT School of Architecture for a number of years. So this is his early text from 1990s, where he is discussing new agenda for computer-aided design and discussing its impact on architecture, foreseeing its impact on architectural education. Also by the same author is chapter from a book called Logic in Architecture, which is also available for you to download in the Google Plus account. This is piece about shape grammar. If you don't know shape grammar, if you haven't run across it, this is a very good way to get closer to it. It has some impact on a way of designing and understanding architecture syntactically in a kind of linguistic way, and it's very clear kind of elegant piece. He explores syntax of Palladian villas, plans of Palladian villas, and generates different variations. I mean, this all basically underlying logic is also of importance to parametric design and to methodology of thinking. More recent piece by Achim Menges. This is from his book Manufacturing Material Effects, Rethinking Design and Making in Architecture. If you don't have this book at hand, it will suffice to read this chapter with illustrations. You can find a fair amount of recent material on this person's work. He is now a distinguished teacher and has a few very good PhD students. They do a lot of interesting work. But I would like to kind of you to penetrate his position from this particular piece of writing. He writes, among other things, that natural systems operate in a similar fashion, reconciling in material structures that result from both internal physical constraints and external influences and forces. He gives examples for that as well. So computational system for him is one which operates through interaction and variation of information. Finally, the next paper, this one is somewhat maybe more philosophical than others. This is Mexican. He's a philosopher, actually, Manuel de Landa. Taught at SCIARC and School of Architecture, and I think at Columbia as well. He is citing some historical benchmarks in physics and mathematics to delineate framework for computational approach. His work is, in a sense, touching issue of parametric design. He claims that parameters of the process do not hold definition of specific material entity, rather the process needs to be executed to unfold the nature and magnitude of physical interaction, whose repercussion is particular organization of material properties. Some of it might be a little bit dense reading, but I think they are significant sentences, so you have to take it slowly. And those are not very long texts. Two more papers. The first one by Peter Trammer, also philosopher, designer, and teacher of architecture, reasonably young guy. I don't know where he's maybe Viennese, but I'm not sure, and I don't know where he is right now, probably in the States somewhere. His students do interesting work, and he's well informed. Also illustrated with examples of his and his students' work. So this paper is interesting as well, and it's full of insights which you will enjoy to penetrate. Final paper is Patrick Shoemaker, who you probably know as a partner of Zaha Hadid. He wrote, good 5-6 years ago, rather controversial manifesto called Parametricist Manifesto, and you might look it up. It probably exists somewhere on the web. But this article is his most recent article, and I think he puts this earlier work in a context of his present position. And this is very not only talented man, not only practicing, but also designer with those ambitions, trained out of AA and very well read. So looking at his writing, I think, brings you up to kind of current syntax and discourse of the field. So this is more or less the scope. So I want to I publish those slides for you within, well, by Monday or Tuesday. I would like to distribute 6 of those readers, because I don't have any more. I just don't have a budget to produce those things. But I have 6 for you, so you can keep it. When you finish, I would like to have them back, because they actually faculty paid for the production, so it should go back to our shelf here. So those 12 papers are there, including essay by Goethe, though you don't have to. So I want to limit your choices to those 12 papers, excluding Goethe. I have to get essay too. So I would like each of you to log into Google+. You should have an account on our Google domain. And but if you don't click on Google+, you cannot activate your account. So do that, and you'll find there that you are part of this community, which is probably called parametric design or something like that. And maybe in directory lectures, you'll find. I should open that. But anyway, maybe I'll open it in a second. I published there 4 papers which are not. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't to show that. So, in a reader there is 8 papers, and 4 more. I read them here. 4 of them are. I didn't manage to get into Reader, but you can download the PDFs from your Google Plus account. So you can look at the readers, which give you like little abstracts, and you kind of know what they were about. And if you choose to study this, you have to download it. And so I would like everybody to look at those 12 papers, because we want to make reference in our exams to it. I would like you to group maximum 3 students per 1 unique paper. I would like to formulate 2 questions and 2 answers per group. So you have 1 paper, each group has 1 paper, reads it, formulate 2 questions related to this, and propose 2 answers. We'll use this material in the final exam. Publish your Q&A in Google+, because there is a directory there where you can submit that. Oh, this is the address, D5 Readings Q&A. So before I go to Google to find how this account is accessible, because I only did it once, I want to finish with this slide, which is difficult for me to read, but this is, of course, Tête de Taureau, 1942. This is what Pablo Picasso said about it. One day, in a pile of objects, all jumbled up together, I found an old bicycle seat right next to a rusty set of handlebars. In a flash, they joined together in my head. The idea of bull's head came to me before I had a chance to think. All I did was weld them together. But, he says later, if you were only to see the bull's head and not the bicycle seat and handlebars that form it, the sculpture would lose some of its impact. Let me leave you with that.